Marcus Hayes was once a name people whispered with admiration. He wasn't just another entrepreneur, he was a trailblazer, one of the few black CEOs in Silicon Valley who had managed to build something extraordinary from scratch. His tech startup, born out of late-night coding sessions and fueled by relentless ambition, had attracted millions in venture capital funding. For a while, it seemed like nothing could stop him. But success is often fleeting, especially when you're trying to navigate an industry that rarely welcomes outsiders. It all started falling apart slowly. A crack here, a fracture there. First came the lawsuits. Investors who had initially praised Marcus's vision turned against him, accusing him of mismanagement and poor decision-making. Then came the financial strain. Despite his best efforts, revenue wasn't growing fast enough to cover operational costs. Employees began leaving for greener pastures, taking their talent elsewhere. And as if that wasn't enough, personal debts piled up. Marcus sold his sleek Tesla to keep the company afloat, trading it for a beat-up rental sedan that barely passed emissions tests. Every day felt like running on fumes, literally and figuratively. On this particular evening, rain poured relentlessly over San Francisco, turning streets into shimmering rivers under dim streetlights. Marcus sat slumped behind the wheel of his rental car, gripping it tightly as fatigue weighed down his shoulders. The meeting he'd attended earlier hadn't gone well. Potential partners had dismissed his ideas without even giving them a fair chance, citing market uncertainty as their excuse. It stung, not because they were wrong, but because Marcus knew deep down that they weren't entirely right either. His concept was solid, it just needed someone willing to take a risk. Unfortunately, risks weren't exactly popular these days. As he drove away from the city center, the traffic thinned, replaced by stretches of empty highway flanked by dense forests. The rhythmic sound of windshield wipers slicing through sheets of rain provided a strange kind of comfort, lulling him into a state of half-awareness. That's when he saw her, a figure standing alone on the shoulder of the road, drenched and shivering despite wearing what looked like an expensive leather jacket. Her hood was pulled low over her face, obscuring most of her features, but her posture spoke volumes. She looked defeated yet determined, as though she'd been waiting there for hours and refused to give up. Marcus slowed the car instinctively, his conscience tugging at him. He'd been in situations like this before, not the exact same scenario, but moments where he'd relied on strangers' kindness during his own struggles. Back when he was still hustling to get his business off the ground, he remembered hitching rides or accepting meals from people who didn't owe him anything but chose to help anyway. Those small acts of generosity had meant the world to him then. Now, staring at this stranger soaked to the bone, he couldn't bring himself to drive past. He rolled down the passenger side window, leaning slightly toward the opening. "Hey," he called out above the patter of rain. "You need a ride?" The woman hesitated, her head tilting slightly as though assessing whether he posed a threat. After a moment, she nodded almost imperceptibly and stepped closer. Up close, Marcus noticed how young she was, younger than he'd initially thought. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Her eyes darted nervously around before settling on him, searching for reassurance. Something about her demeanor struck him as odd, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was the way she moved cautiously, like someone perpetually on edge. Or perhaps it was the fact that she carried no luggage, no backpack, nothing except a small envelope clutched tightly in her hand. Without saying a word, she opened the door and slid into the seat beside him. The interior of the car filled with the faint scent of wet leather and something else, something floral, expensive. She pulled her hood back slightly, revealing sharp cheekbones and damp strands of dark hair plastered against her forehead. Still, she avoided direct eye contact, keeping her gaze fixed on the dashboard instead. "Thanks for stopping," she murmured finally, her voice soft but steady. There was an accent there, subtle but unmistakable. European, maybe? British? Marcus wasn't sure, but it added another layer of intrigue to her already enigmatic presence. "No problem," Marcus replied, glancing briefly at her before focusing back on the road. "What are you doing out here in this weather? You okay?" She hesitated again, clearly debating how much to reveal. When she spoke, her words were measured, careful. I'm trying to get away from someone. My ex. He won't leave me. Alone. Marcus frowned sympathetically. He'd heard stories like this before. Women fleeing abusive relationships, seeking refuge wherever they could find it. If that was truly her situation, he understood why she might be reluctant to share details. Abusers have a way of making their victims feel trapped, even when they're physically free. Still, there was something about her story that didn't quite add up. For starters, her clothes, while soaked, were far too stylish to belong to someone living paycheck to paycheck. And those hands. They were immaculately manicured, not the calloused palms of someone accustomed to hardship. Before he could press further, she shifted uncomfortably in her seat, drawing his attention back to her. "Do you mind if we don't talk about it?" she asked quietly, almost apologetically. I need to get somewhere safe." Marcus nodded, respecting her boundaries. "Sure thing. Where to?" She hesitated again, then shrugged. "Anywhere but here. Just keep driving for now." And so he did. The miles ticked by in silence, broken only by the occasional flicker of headlights from passing cars and the steady hum of the engine. Despite her reticence, Marcus found himself glancing at her every few minutes, curiosity gnawing at him. Who was she really? Why was she alone on this desolate stretch of highway? And what secrets lay hidden beneath that guarded exterior? For now, answers would have to wait. All Marcus knew was that he couldn't abandon her, not after seeing the desperation etched into her face. Whatever trouble she was running from, he hoped she'd find safety soon. Little did he realize, however, that picking her up would change both their lives forever. The rain continued to pour as Marcus drove, the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers slicing through the wet night air. The silence between him and his mysterious passenger felt heavy, like an unspoken tension hanging in the car. Every so often Marcus would glance at her from the corner of his eye, trying to piece together who she really was. She stared out the window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass, her expression unreadable. Her fingers tapped nervously against the envelope she still clutched tightly in her lap. It was clear she was carrying some kind of weight. Emotional, mental, or maybe even literal, but she wasn't ready to share it yet. After what felt like an eternity of quiet, Marcus decided to break the ice again. "So," he began casually, keeping his tone light, "you got a name? Or should I just call you the Hitchhiker?" She hesitated for a moment before responding, her voice soft but steady. "Elena," she said finally, glancing at him, briefly before returning her gaze to the window. "You can call me Elena." "Nice to meet you, Elena," Marcus replied with a small smile, though she didn't return it. "I'm Marcus." "I know," she said simply, surprising him. "When..." He raised an eyebrow in question. She added, "You told me your name when you stopped, remember?" "Oh, right," Marcus chuckled, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. He hadn't realized she'd been paying that much attention. "Well, nice to officially meet you, Elena. So, where are we headed exactly?" Elena shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting toward the road ahead. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere far from here." Marcus nodded slowly, processing her words. Something about the way she spoke, the carefulness, the guardedness, made him think there was more to her story than she was letting on. But he didn't push. Instead, he tried to make conversation, hoping to ease the tension. "You said you're running from someone earlier. Want to talk about it?" For a split second, he thought she might open up. Her lips parted slightly as if she were about to say something, but then she closed them again, shaking her head. "Not now," she murmured. "Maybe later. But not now." Marcus respected her boundaries, nodding silently. He turned his focus back to the road, letting the hum of the engine fill the space between them once more. Still, his mind raced with questions. Who was this woman? Why did she seem so uneasy? And why did she look like she belonged in a luxury penthouse rather than the passenger seat of his beat-up rental sedan? As they drove further into the countryside, the landscape grew darker, the streetlights fewer and farther between. The only illumination came from the headlights slicing through the rain-soaked roads. Marcus noticed Elena pulling her jacket tighter around herself, shivering despite its thickness. Without thinking, he reached over to adjust the heater controls. Turning, "Up the warmth, you cold?" he asked gently. She shook her head, though her trembling hands suggested otherwise. "I'll be fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a sadness in her tone, a weariness that went beyond physical discomfort. It made Marcus wonder how long she'd been on the run, how many nights she'd spent alone, unsure of what tomorrow might bring. Eventually, the silence became too much for Marcus to bear. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Listen, Elena, I don't mean to pry, but I gotta ask, you sure you're okay? You don't have to tell me everything, but if there's anything I can do to help." This time she turned to look at him fully, her piercing eyes locking onto his. For a brief moment, Marcus saw something flicker behind them, fear maybe, or desperation. Then just as quickly it disappeared, replaced by a mask of calm. "I appreciate the offer," she said quietly. "But trust me, you don't want to get involved in my problems." Her words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. What kind of trouble could she possibly be in? Was it really just an abusive ex-boyfriend? Or was there something else lurking beneath the surface? Before he could respond, Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out the envelope she'd been holding. She opened it slightly, revealing a glimpse of what was inside. Stacks of cash bound neatly together with rubber bands. Marcus's jaw dropped. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," he stammered, his eyes darting between the road and the envelope. "What is that? Is that real money?" Elena froze, realizing her mistake. Quickly, she shoved the envelope back into her pocket, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment, or perhaps fear. "It's nothing," she said hurriedly. "Just forget you saw that." "Forget I saw that?" Marcus repeated incredulously. "How am I supposed to forget seeing thousands of dollars stuffed into an envelope?" "Elena, what's going on?" She sighed heavily, running a hand through her damp hair. "Look, I didn't mean for you to see that. It's complicated, okay? Let's just leave it at that." "Complicated?" Marcus echoed, his curiosity piqued even more. "Complicated how? Did you steal it? Is that why you're running?" "No," Elena snapped, her voice sharper than before. Immediately, she softened, exhaling deeply. "No," she repeated, quieter this time. "I didn't steal it. It's mine." "Well, sort of." "Sort of?" Marcus pressed, unable to hide his confusion. "What does that even mean?" Elena hesitated, clearly torn between keeping her secrets and trusting this stranger who had gone out of his way to help her. Finally, she relented, speaking in hushed tones. "Let's just say I took it because I needed it, and because they owe me." "They?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowing. "Who's they?" She shook her head firmly. "I can't tell you, not yet. Just know that I didn't do anything wrong. If anything, I'm the victim here." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus wanted to believe her. He truly did. But the situation was becoming increasingly bizarre. A mysterious woman with an envelope full of cash claiming to be on the run from people who owed her something. It sounded like the plot of a movie, not real life. Yet here he was, driving her deeper into the unknown, feeling more entangled with each passing mile. To change the subject, Elena suddenly leaned forward, pointing to a sign indicating a gas station a few miles ahead. "Can we stop there?" she asked. "I need to stretch my legs and maybe grab something to eat." Marcus nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Sure thing. I could use a snack myself." When they arrived at the gas station, Marcus parked near the entrance and followed Elena inside. She moved with purpose, grabbing a bottle of water and a protein bar from the shelves before heading to the counter. As she paid, Marcus noticed her demeanor shift slightly. She seemed more alert, scanning the room with quick, calculated glances. Was she looking for someone? Or was she worried about being recognized? Back in the car, Elena unwrapped her protein bar and took a small bite. Chewing slowly, Marcus watched her, noticing how she held herself, poised, refined, almost regal. It was such a stark contrast to her current circumstances that it made him wonder again about her background. Who was she before all this? And what had driven her to flee whatever life she'd left behind? "You're not telling me everything," Marcus said eventually, breaking the silence. His tone wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact. "And that's fine. You don't owe me anything. But I want you to know that if you ever feel like talking, I'm here. No judgment." Elena looked at him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. After a moment, she gave him a tiny, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." They continued driving, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Marcus shared bits and pieces of his own struggles, the failed business deals, the betrayals by former colleagues, the sleepless nights wondering if he'd ever recover financially. Elena listened intently, occasionally offering cryptic advice that hinted at a level of sophistication far beyond her apparent age. At one point, she even suggested a strategy for restructuring his company's debt that left Marcus stunned. "How do you know so much about this stuff?" he asked, genuinely impressed. Elena shrugged nonchalantly. "Let's just say I've dealt with difficult situations before." Her vague response only deepened Marcus's intrigue. Whoever this woman was, she was no ordinary hitchhiker. By the time they reached a small motel nestled along the highway, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled into something far bigger than he'd anticipated. But for now, all he could do was watch as Elena stepped out of the car, clutching her envelope tightly, and disappeared into the shadows of the night. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Groggy and disoriented, he reached for it, squinting at the screen as notifications flooded in. News alerts, social media posts. Something big was happening, and his gut told him it had everything to do with Elena. He clicked on one of the headlines. "Billionaire heiress missing after family scandal rocks real estate empire." The accompanying photo stopped him cold. It was her, Elena. Her face stared back at him from the screen, framed by bold letters that screamed urgency. According to the article, she was the estranged daughter of Charles Whitmore, a real estate tycoon whose name was synonymous with wealth and power. But beneath the glitz and glamour lay a web of corruption, fraud, and betrayal. And now, Elena was at the center of it all. Marcus's heart sank as he scrolled through the details. Days earlier, Elena had vanished without a trace, taking millions from her family trust fund. Or at least that's what the media was reporting. Rumors swirled about embezzlement, theft, and even attempted murder. Yet something about the story didn't sit right with Marcus. He thought back to their conversation in the car. The fear in her eyes, the bruises on her wrists, the cryptic warnings about people who owed her. Was she really a fugitive, or was there more to this than met the eye? His mind raced as he debated what to do next. On one hand, picking up a hitchhiker had already landed him in deeper waters than he'd anticipated. Helping a woman wanted by the authorities, or worse, hunted by powerful criminals, was a recipe for disaster. But on the other hand, how could he walk away? Elena wasn't just some random stranger anymore. She was someone in trouble. Someone who reminded him of his own battles against systems rigged against him. If he turned his back on her now, wouldn't he be betraying everything he stood for? After wrestling with his conscience for what felt like hours, Marcus made up his mind. He needed answers, and he needed them straight from Elena herself. Grabbing his keys, he headed to the motel where they'd parted ways the night before. When Marcus arrived, Elena was sitting on the edge of her bed, fully dressed and ready to leave. She looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. "You saw the news," she said flatly, not bothering to ask how he knew. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "I did," Marcus replied, closing the door behind him. "Care to explain?" Elena sighed, running a hand through her still damp hair. For the first time since they'd met, she seemed resigned, as if holding on to her secrets any longer was pointless. "Fine," she said finally, "but you're not going to like it." Over the next hour, Elena poured out her story, starting from the beginning. Growing up as the only child of Charles Whitmore came with privileges most people could only dream of, but also with expectations no one should have to bear. From a young age, she'd been groomed to take over the family empire, forced into a life of galas, board meetings, and calculated alliances. Her father controlled every aspect of her existence, dictating whom she could see, where she could go, and how she should behave. Rebellion was punished swiftly and severely. Things took a darker turn when Elena discovered evidence of her father's illegal activities. Through years of digging, carefully, quietly, she uncovered documents proving that his fortune was built on corruption, bribery, money laundering, exploitation of workers, and worse. When she confronted him, demanding justice, he laughed in her face. "This is how the world works, Elena," he'd sneered. "If you can't play the game, you don't deserve to win." But Elena refused to stay silent. Using her access to confidential files, she began gathering proof of his crimes, planning to expose him to the authorities. However, her father caught wind of her plans and retaliated viciously. He froze her accounts, cut off her resources, and spread lies about her stealing millions from the family trust fund. Then, to ensure her silence, he hired private operatives to hunt her down. "That envelope you saw?" Elena said bitterly, pulling it out again. "It's all I managed to salvage before I ran. Not stolen money, my money. Everything I earned, from legitimate investments over the years. He tried to take it all, but I got to it first." Marcus listened in stunned silence, piecing together the fragments of her story. What had initially seemed like a tale of privilege and greed was actually one of survival and resistance. Elena wasn't the villain the media portrayed her to be. She was fighting back against a system designed to crush her. "So why didn't you go to the police?" Marcus asked. "With evidence like that, you could have brought him down." Elena shook her head, her jaw tightening. "Because he owns them," she said simply. "My father doesn't just bribe officials. He controls entire departments. Going to the cops would have been suicide. I had to disappear, to protect myself until I could figure out another way." Her words hit Marcus hard. He'd faced similar challenges in his own career, though on a much smaller scale. Investors who promised support only to pull funding at the last-minute, competitors who used underhanded tactics to sabotage his business, all because he was an outsider, trying to break into a world that didn't want him. Now, sitting across from Elena, he realized their struggles weren't so different after all. Both were fighting uphill battles against forces far greater than themselves. "What are you going to do now?" Marcus asked, his voice softening. Elena hesitated, weighing her options. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been running for weeks, but I can't keep doing this forever. Sooner or later, they'll find me." Marcus leaned forward, determination flashing in his eyes. "Then let me help you." Elena blinked, taken aback. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." "Because I believe you," Marcus said firmly. "And because nobody deserves to live like this, not you, not anyone. Besides, I owe it to myself to fight for what's right. Maybe helping you clear your name will remind me why I started my company in the first place." For a moment, Elena just stared at him, her guard lowering ever so slightly. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "But this isn't going to be easy. My father won't stop until I'm either dead or ruined. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Honestly? No. But sometimes you just have to take the leap and hope for the best." Over the following days, Marcus and Elena devised a plan. Using his tech expertise, Marcus set up secure communication channels, encrypted devices, and fake identities to keep them off the grid. Meanwhile, Elena worked tirelessly to organize the evidence she'd gathered, piecing together a damning case against her father. Together, they moved from safe house to safe house, avoiding detection while staying one step ahead of the men hunting them. Their partnership wasn't without its challenges. Trust didn't come easily for either of them. Marcus had been burned too many times in the past, and Elena had learned the hard way that vulnerability could be deadly. But as they spent more time together, a bond began to form. They shared late-night conversations about their dreams, fears, and regrets. Marcus admired Elena's resilience and intelligence, traits that reminded him of his younger self. Elena, in turn, respected Marcus's integrity and unwavering commitment to doing the right thing, even when it cost him dearly. One evening, as they sat huddled around a laptop in a dingy apartment, reviewing surveillance footage of one of her father's properties, Elena turned to Marcus with a rare smile. "You know," she said, "if we pull this off, I might just owe you my life." Marcus chuckled, though his tone remained serious. "Let's focus on getting you justice first. We'll worry about gratitude later." Little did they know, danger was closer than they thought. Unknown to them, one of Charles Whitmore's operatives had traced Elena's movements to their current location. As they celebrated a breakthrough discovery, a key document linking her father to a major scandal, they failed to notice the shadow lurking outside their window. By the time they realized they weren't alone, it was almost too late. Sudden crash shattered the quiet, followed by the sound of splintering wood as the front door burst open. Masked figures stormed inside, weapons drawn. Elena instinctively grabbed the laptop, clutching it to her chest as Marcus stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. "This ends now," one of the intruders barked, pointing a gun directly. At Marcus, time seemed to slow as Elena made a split-second decision. With a fierce cry, she lunged forward, using the laptop as a makeshift weapon to disarm the nearest attacker. Chaos erupted as Marcus joined the fray, tackling another assailant. To the ground. Though outnumbered, they fought with desperate determination, fueled by the knowledge that failure meant certain death. In the end, it was Elena's quick thinking that saved them. Spotting a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, she yanked it free and hurled it at the remaining intruder, knocking him unconscious. Gasping for breath, they surveyed the scene, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "We need to move," Marcus said urgently, grabbing their belongings. "They'll send reinforcements." Elena nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "For good." As they fled into the night, Marcus couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Against all odds, they were still standing and more determined than ever to bring the truth to light. After narrowly escaping the ambush at the safe house, Marcus and Elena found themselves on the run again, their hearts pounding with adrenaline and fear. The attack had been a wake-up call, a stark reminder that they were playing a dangerous game against people who wouldn't hesitate to kill them. But instead of breaking them, the close call only strengthened their resolve. They knew they couldn't afford any more mistakes. Every move had to count. The first thing they did was ditch the rental car. It was too risky. If Charles Whitmore's operatives had tracked them once, they could do it again. So, under the cover of darkness, they abandoned the sedan in a deserted parking lot and hitched a ride with a truck driver headed out of town. The man didn't ask questions, just nodded when they said they needed to get as far away as possible. For hours they sat silently in the back of his rig, listening to the hum of tires on asphalt and planning their next steps. Once they reached a small, unassuming town miles away from the chaos, they rented another motel room using cash and fake IDs Marcus had prepared earlier. This time they chose a place tucked deep into the woods, far from prying eyes. Inside they spread out their materials, laptops, documents, flash drives, and began piecing together the final puzzle. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she connected the laptop to an external hard drive containing years' worth of evidence against her father. "This is everything," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "If we can expose this, it'll destroy him." Marcus nodded, his jaw set firmly. "Then let's make sure we don't screw it up." Over the next few days they worked tirelessly, barely sleeping or eating. Elena walked Marcus through the intricacies of her father's empire. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the bribes paid to politicians and law enforcement officials. She explained how he manipulated markets, exploited workers, and silenced anyone who dared oppose him. As Marcus listened, his blood boiled. He'd always known corruption existed, but seeing it laid out so clearly, in black and white, was infuriating. It wasn't just about greed. It was about power, control, and oppression. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was fighting for something bigger than himself. While Elena focused on organizing the data, Marcus used his tech skills to create a secure digital vault where they could store all the incriminating files. He also set up multiple backup systems, ensuring that even if their primary source was compromised, copies would remain accessible. Additionally, he reached out to a trusted journalist friend, a woman named Lisa Chen, who specialized in investigative reporting. Though Marcus hadn't seen Lisa in years, he knew she was ethical, relentless, and fearless. If anyone could help bring Charles Whitmore down, it was her. When Lisa agreed to meet them secretly at a remote cabin 2 states over, Marcus and Elena breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, they had someone on their side who understood the gravity of the situation. When they arrived at the cabin, Lisa greeted them cautiously, her sharp eyes scanning their faces before inviting them inside. Once seated around a rickety wooden table, Elena handed over the encrypted flash drive containing the evidence. "This proves my father's crimes," she said simply. "But you need to be careful. If word gets out that you have this, they'll come after you too." Lisa examined the drive thoughtfully, nodding slowly. "I've dealt with powerful enemies before," she replied. "But I'll admit, your father makes most of them look like amateurs. Are you sure you want to go public with this? There's no turning back once it's out there." Elena met Lisa's gaze squarely, her expression unwavering. "I'm sure," she said. "He's ruined lives, including mine, for long enough. It's time the world knows the truth." With Lisa on board, the plan started falling into place. She promised to verify the documents, cross-reference them with her own sources, and publish a series of exposés that would leave Charles Whitmore with nowhere to hide. In the meantime, Marcus and Elena continued laying low, knowing that every second counted. They monitored news outlets and social media obsessively, waiting for signs that their efforts were working. But danger lurked closer than they realized. One evening, as they prepared dinner in the cabin, Marcus noticed movement outside the window. At first he dismissed it as wildlife, a deer or maybe a raccoon. But then he saw it, the faint glow of a flashlight bouncing between the trees. Someone was out there. "Elena," he hissed, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back door. "We need to go. Now." Without hesitation, Elena grabbed the laptop and the remaining flash drives, stuffing them into a backpack. Together, they slipped out into the night, moving quickly but quietly through the dense forest. Behind them, shouts echoed as men stormed the cabin, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. For what felt like hours, Marcus and Elena ran, weaving between trees and scrambling over fallen logs. Their lungs burned, their legs ached, but they pushed forward, driven by sheer willpower. Eventually, they stumbled upon an old abandoned shed hidden deep in the woods. Collapsing inside, they barricaded the door with whatever debris they could find and huddled together, trying to catch their breath. "We can't keep running forever," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "They're closing in." "I know," Marcus replied grimly. "But we're not giving up. Not now." As dawn broke, they devised a new strategy. Knowing they couldn't stay hidden indefinitely, they decided to take the fight directly to Charles Whitmore. Using burner phones, they anonymously tipped off local authorities about illegal activities linked to one of his properties, a warehouse allegedly storing hazardous materials without proper permits. The tip was vague enough not to raise suspicion, but specific enough to prompt an investigation. If successful, it would draw attention to his operations and buy them precious time. Meanwhile, Lisa worked tirelessly to release the first wave of exposés. Within days, headlines exploded across national news outlets. "Real estate tycoon under fire for alleged corruption scandal." "Documents reveal Whitmore empire built on fraud." "Whistleblower claims family patriarch orchestrated." Decades-long scheme. Public outrage grew, fueled by mounting evidence of Charles Whitmore's wrongdoing. Protesters gathered outside his corporate headquarters, demanding accountability, while lawmakers called for formal investigations. Back in hiding, Marcus and Elena watched it all unfold with a mix of awe and apprehension. They were winning, but victory came at a cost. Sleep deprivation, constant fear, and the weight of their mission took its toll. Yet despite everything, they refused to give up. For Marcus, it was about justice. Not just for Elena, but for everyone Charles Whitmore had hurt along the way. And for Elena, it was personal. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for redemption, for closure, for the chance to reclaim her life. Finally, the moment of reckoning arrived. Armed with irrefutable proof of his crimes, law enforcement launched a coordinated raid on Charles Whitmore's estate. Cameras captured the scene as officers led him away in handcuffs, his face pale and drawn. Reporters swarmed the property, shouting questions as he disappeared into a police cruiser. For the first time in decades, the man who had ruled with an iron fist was powerless. Watching the footage from a safe distance, Elena felt a surge of emotions: relief, triumph, sadness. Turning to Marcus, she managed a small, grateful smile. "We did it," she said softly. "It's over." Marcus returned her smile, though his eyes reflected the exhaustion etched into both their faces. "Yeah," he replied. "But it's not just us, Elena. It's everyone who's ever stood up to bullies like your father. People like you didn't let him win." As the dust settled, Elena emerged from the shadows, stepping into the spotlight to tell her story publicly. Her testimony became a rallying cry for others trapped in similar situations, inspiring countless individuals to speak out against abuse and corruption. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to his company, revitalized by the experience. With Elena's financial backing and his renewed sense of purpose, he transformed his struggling startup into a thriving enterprise dedicated to empowering marginalized communities. Though their paths diverged afterward, with Elena dedicating her life to advocacy work and Marcus focusing on rebuilding his business, they remained close friends. Their bond, forged in fire, proved unbreakable. Together, they had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, proving that resilience, courage, and trust could change the course of fate itself. The aftermath of Charles Whitmore's arrest sent shockwaves through the world. What had once been an untouchable empire crumbled overnight, leaving behind a trail of lawsuits, investigations, and public outrage. For Elena, it marked the end of a nightmare that had haunted her for years. But it was also the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. In the days following her father's downfall, Elena stepped into the spotlight, determined to use her platform for good. She held a press conference at a modest community center, surrounded by reporters eager to hear her side of the story. Dressed simply but elegantly, she stood before the crowd with poise and grace, her voice steady as she recounted the truth about her family's corruption and her fight to expose it. "I didn't choose this battle," she began, her eyes scanning the room. "It chose me. My father taught me many things: how to navigate boardrooms, how to command respect, how to play the game. But he also taught me something else: that power unchecked is dangerous. I couldn't stand by and let him destroy more lives. So I fought back." Her words resonated deeply, not just because of their honesty, but because of the vulnerability behind them. She spoke of sleepless nights, of moments when fear almost paralyzed her, of the sacrifices she'd made to see justice served. And as she talked, tears welled up in the eyes of those listening, not out of pity, but out of admiration. Here was a woman who had faced unimaginable odds and refused to break. When the floor opened for questions, one reporter asked the inevitable, "What's next for you?" Elena smiled faintly, her gaze softening. "I'm done running," she said. "For years I lived in my father's shadow, trying to escape his reach. Now I want to step into the light. I plan to dedicate my life to helping others who feel trapped, whether it's by abusive relationships, corrupt systems, or societal expectations. If sharing my story can inspire even one person to stand up for themselves, then everything I've been through will have been worth it." Her announcement sparked a wave of support. Social media lit up with messages of encouragement while advocacy groups reached out to collaborate with her. Within weeks, Elena launched a foundation aimed at supporting survivors of domestic abuse and corporate exploitation. Her first initiative? A legal fund designed to provide resources for whistleblowers like herself, people brave enough to challenge powerful entities despite the risks. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself transformed by the experience too. The month spent working alongside Elena reignited a fire within him that had long been extinguished. He realized that his struggles weren't failures, they were lessons, reminders of why he'd started his company in the first place. Inspired by Elena's courage, he decided to pivot his business model entirely. With Elena's financial backing and moral support, Marcus rebranded his startup as a tech-for-good enterprise. Instead of chasing profits at any cost, he focused on creating tools to empower marginalized communities. One of his flagship projects was a secure digital platform designed to help whistleblowers share evidence anonymously, a direct response to the challenges they'd faced during their mission. Another initiative involved partnering with nonprofits to provide free coding workshops for underprivileged youth, giving them access to skills often reserved for privileged circles. As his company grew, so did its impact. News outlets hailed Marcus as a visionary, praising his commitment to ethical entrepreneurship. Yet he remained humble, crediting much of his success to the lessons he'd learned from Elena. "She reminded me what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself," he told an interviewer during a feature segment. And now, every decision we make as a company reflects that philosophy. Though their lives took different directions, Marcus and Elena stayed close. Their bond, forged in adversity, only deepened over time. They met regularly for coffee or late-night phone calls, catching up on each other's progress and offering advice whenever needed. Sometimes they laughed about the absurdity of it all, the hitchhiker and the broke CEO teaming up to take down a billionaire. Other times they reflected on the weight of what they'd accomplished together. One evening, months after the dust had settled, Marcus invited Elena to visit his office. It was a sleek, modern space filled with natural light, a stark contrast to the dingy motel rooms and remote cabins where they'd once plotted their strategy. As they walked through the open-plan workspace, employees greeted them warmly, their enthusiasm palpable. Elena smiled, clearly impressed. "You've come a long way," she said, leaning against a desk as Marcus poured them both cups of coffee. "This place feels alive." Marcus chuckled, handing her a mug. "Yeah, well, it helps when you're not constantly worried about going bankrupt." His tone turned serious as he added, "But none of this would have happened without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Elena shook her head, brushing off the compliment. "Don't give me too much credit, you did the hard work. All I did was remind you of your potential." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their drinks and watching the city lights flicker outside the window. Finally, Elena spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "Do you ever think about how strange life is? How one decision can change everything?" "All the time," Marcus admitted. "If I hadn't stopped that night, if I'd driven past you, who knows where either of us would be right now?" Elena nodded, a wistful smile playing on her lips. "Maybe we'd still be stuck in our old lives. Or maybe fate would have found another way to bring us together." "Fate?" Marcus teased, raising an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as someone who believes in destiny." "I didn't used to," Elena admitted. "But after everything we've been through, let's just say I'm starting to reconsider." They shared a laugh, the kind born of shared history and mutual understanding. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of productivity and the glow of accomplishment, they both felt a profound sense of gratitude for each other, for the journey they'd endured, and for the future stretching ahead of them. Years later, when people asked Marcus and Elena about their extraordinary partnership, they always gave the same answer. It wasn't luck, it was trust. Trust in themselves, trust in each other, and trust in the idea that even in the darkest moments hope could shine through. Elena went on to become a global advocate for transparency and accountability, using her wealth and influence to dismantle systems of oppression wherever she found them. Marcus, meanwhile, built a legacy as a pioneer in ethical technology, proving that businesses could thrive while doing good. Together, they showed the world that resilience and integrity could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. And though their paths diverged in countless ways, they never forgot the rainy night that brought them together, or the incredible journey that followed. Because sometimes, picking up a stranger isn't just an act of kindness. Sometimes, it's the start of something extraordinary.